Today, I'm going to be talking about alone, or being alone versus being lonely, and the differences between the two, and why I believe being alone is very beneficial, and why being lonely, I believe, is all a mindset. In the book Discourses by Epictetus, he has a chapter on what loneliness is and the kind of person who is lonely, and that kind of sparked the idea for this video. And I've always kind of believed being alone and lonely are two very different things, and you must understand this. And I think he just had a lot of amazing points in here that I'd like to present to you guys, and kind of give some of my own feedback and kind of what I think about the situation. So he starts it off with saying, loneliness is the condition of someone who is helpless. Just being alone doesn't necessarily make a person lonely as well, any more than being in a crowd means that a person isn't lonely. So, what he's saying there, essentially, is it doesn't matter if you're in a room alone or you're around 1,000 people. You can be lonely in both instances. And if that's the case, then it has to be a mindset. It's not an external thing that makes you lonely. It has to be in your head. If whether you're alone or with people, you're still lonely. So that has to do with something with inside, internally, that you feel alone. And a couple sentences later, he says, it's fundamental to the concept of loneliness that a lonely person has no one to help him and is at the mercy of those who wish to harm him. So when you're lonely, you're basically at the mercy of everybody. You're not able to help yourself if you're lonely. You're dependent on external situations and circumstances, and I believe you never want to be dependent on those things, because they're so fleeting and impossible to predict, and just so impossible to predict, essentially. And if you put your well-being in things of that nature, you're bound to be miserable and feel lonely and feel sad, because you're getting nothing from inside, and that's where everything should come from. Oneself should be lifted up by oneself, I believe. So I really enjoy what he said at the start of this, and 100% agree with it. And then he says, one's skill set should also include this: the ability to be self-sufficient, to live with oneself. Your skill set should allow you to be self-sufficient and be alone. You shouldn't need people to do things. You shouldn't need people to go out and have a good time or to have a good day. Your ideal day, we are sociable creatures, and it's human nature to want to be around people and spend time with people. But if you're dependent on that to have a good day, then you are going to have a rough time in life, I believe, because there's not always going to be people around, and it's not always going to be the people that you want to be with. And if you're dependent on these external circumstances, then you're just bound to feel lonely a lot of the times, and you don't want that. You want to be able to feel like you're surrounded by a bunch of friends and family and amazing people when you're alone, because you truly are if you're surrounded by yourself, and God is always with you. So if you can just have that mindset, then when you're alone, you'll be fine. Then he brings up things here that talks about kind of what you should think when you're alone. The things you should reflect on. You shouldn't just sit there in silence and not reflect on anything and just, look at your phone or watch videos. That's not truly being alone. If you're, sitting there playing video games or scrolling on Instagram or watching YouTube. I like watching YouTube, but if I'm sitting there watching YouTube for 4 hours, I don't know, it's hard for me to think that I was truly alone. Some other person, some other thing was happening while I was present and my whole mind was occupied on it. Like, that is not being alone. Just because no one was physically there doesn't mean that that's you being alone. So he says we should consider what our attitude used to be towards experiences and what it is now. What are the things that still oppress us? How can they too be eliminated? If we need to work on any of them, we should do so prescribed by our reason. So he just says, saying, like I said, to reflect on things, and you should come up with these conclusions by yourself, because that will make them the most real. You won't, like I said, oneself should be lifted up by oneself, and if you can lift yourself up, then it's a genuine lift up. If you need someone else to lift you up, I'm not saying that's bad in every instance, but you shouldn't need someone to lift you up every time you're down, because if no one's around to lift you up, then you're going to stay down, and that's not being self-sufficient. Then he says, philosophical teachings promise to provide us with peace even from these things. What do they say? If you pay attention to me, people, then if you pay attention to me, people, then wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you won't be distressed or angry. You'll be unconstructed and unimpeded. You won't be disturbed by passions, and you'll live a completely trouble-free life. I believe philosophy has helped me a lot in life, and I think that's just what he's saying here. To be alone, you need philosophy. To be truly alone and in a truly good headspace. And I couldn't agree with him more. And when you believe that you're lonely, like I was saying, it's a completely internal mindset. Like, he started out this chapter with saying that you can be alone around 1,000 people, and you can also feel like you're around a million people if you're just with yourself. So you need to remember this, and you need to lift yourself up by yourself. Loneliness is not the same thing as being alone, and being alone is not bad. It's all how you make it.